So my understanding is that your album is kind of the culmination of a lot of traveling around Europe. Is that how it got started?
Yeah, what, the album in particular, or
in general? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, so that's how Samana also came into being. I don't know if we mentioned that before, but I think the very root of the music stems from that sense of movement and the intrigue and discovery that comes both internally and externally from that movement, because the very way that Samana came into being was born off of that essence of really following a sense of freedom that we found when we were exploring, which happened to be Europe, in that sense of just really moving with instinct and intention
right.
around Europe. And then with this album, it then came into fruition out of recording out very rurally and remotely in France, and again being within that same sense of space of just seeing and really giving ourselves to it. But when we recorded this album, it was a bit more, because it was recorded in the period of lockdown in France. Where we were was very, very remote, and it was surrounded by forest and hills and mountainous landscape. So it was more, in that circumstance, it was more just disappearing out on foot and just disappearing out and then coming back to this kind of drawing notion and coming back through foot, which felt really, really right for this album.
I guess it's indicative that the name kind of says it all, it underpins it. The idea of the Sanskrit term of a Samanan monk, if you like, is one that kind of, it's quite very Zarathustrian, it's this idea of this notion of going out and venturing out into the wilderness and learning the ways of nature and the kind of divine movement and the beauty and the symbiosis of all things. And also unperturbed by society and all of its grievances and all of the crazy ways in which things revolve and move. And so the idea is then kind of coming back. It's having that time and space to reflect and to learn and grow, and then coming back. So I think for us, movement has always been kind of paramount to that idea of, and that notion of kind of understanding oneself through finding a sense of stillness, and objectivity, which can only really, I feel personally, in today's society, it's only really attainable in the tranquilness of nature, I think.
Right. Well, as far as Europe goes, did you find Europe to be tranquil when you were there? I don't know exactly when you were there, so because there's been Brexit, there's the thing going in the Ukraine. I mean, it's insane now.
I mean, obviously, when we were recording this album, it was different experience in the sense that, because it was very much, it was the beginning of the lockdown over there, so we were very, very solitary in that sense. But when Samana first came into fruition, there was a lot of tranquility. I think it was a very beautiful balance between the chaos and the serenity. Mm-hmm. Because of the way at that point when it came into being, because we were busking, so we were writing in the mountains, then bringing it into the villages and cities and playing it on the street, and for the intention of propelling ourselves forwards, but also for the intention of connecting without any barrier and limitation. And where we grew from that point as musicians is paramount to that experience. And I think, but the balance of the chaos and the serenity within that whole trip and that time, there was a lot of tranquility, especially in terms of governing thought and the philosophy and the very core that blossomed from that core did blossom from a point of strength and tranquility, actually, very much so. And then all of the chaos, so to speak, and that interweaving of life, that kind of existed more on the outside, because we both together and separately, we built a core that was it came from a point of strength which did stem from a real peace.
Right.
And then you're able to step out into the world and take anything that comes at you,
Right, so, right. Now, my understanding is you recorded the record, the two of you, in an old wooden barn in the French countryside. So how did that happen? Would you just come across this barn, or was it something you rented or built, or what?
So it's a place. So my auntie, she recently married recently married this guy he's lovely, and he owned, so about in the early 1990s he bought this 1990s in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then we've been speaking about the Renaissance and all that today, so we're in the 1900s. In the 90s he bought this. It was very, very old
Mill.
it was an old mill house, but it was a kind of self-contained small hamlet, if you like. He got it at the time for practically nothing. It was a total ruin. It was a total mess. But I think I seem to remember very well that he'd spoken about the idea, because there's a lot of history to this building. It was really, I think during the times of it was the French Revolution, there was the Revolution. There was a lot going on the kind of rural scene, and I know that this place played a big part in French history. He'd be right now. He'd be really angry for being so vague.
The mill was significant, wasn't
but
it?
the mill was, it was significant. In fact, they stored a lot of artillery there. Anyway, but it's this really small, self-contained, what used to be like a self-sufficient hamlet of about 6 properties that were dilapidated. So in the 90s, he took it on. And I think he got it for absolutely nothing. And over the years, he's been chipping away, and he's been kind of restoring it. And so fast forward kind of 18 years, my auntie married him, and in marrying him,
this backstory.
we all of a sudden, he's now family. We said, oh, we've got this lovely place. We thought, oh, we'll take advantage of that. We'll see if we can go out there. So the idea initially was to go and try it out. We'd never been out there before, so we went out there, and we spent kind of what we thought were going to be 2-3 weeks out there, just recording and getting a kind of lay of the land. And that then it transpired to be
3 months.
3 months.
3 months.
Obviously, we got there, and there was a guy who kind of oversees it, and he told us within 2 days. He said, "Oh, there's this lockdown coming." We had no idea what was going on. All of the kind of, the survivalists of France were wringing their hands, because they were all running around the local markets, hoarding huge amounts of toilet paper. And that was us thinking,
that happened here too. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, it happened everywhere, didn't it?
Necessities.
So what we thought to be 3 weeks turned into 3 months, and it was amazing. Actually, it was a magical place to be.
Was it already kitted out to be a studio? Did it have gear in it?
No. We quite literally. So this is actually quite an interesting thing that we haven't really spoken about that much, but being bound by limitations goes back to creation, right? For many artists in lots of different demographics of art. But we had at that point, we went in our car, didn't we? Because the van was having problems at that point. So we went in our car. So basically we put in the equipment that would fit in the car. This is a relatively small car. So we took that equipment over with us, and that became, if you like, the limitation of what we were recording with. So we brought
a drum kit, which took up most of the space.
The drum kit was most of the space. We took a drum kit, we took like the bare necessities, and then we took an old reel-to-reel tape machine, your analog mixing desk.
Yeah, because I've got a good friend of mine. He used to build broadcast consoles in the 1970s.
Right.
He's become a friend of mine because I basically am psychopathic, I think. I started collecting all of these lovely old desks that no one really knew much about at the time, and he turned up because he's such a purist. I sent him an email saying, I've got this problem with one of the transformers, and I never thought, because he used to work with Rupert Neve and he used to work with Joe Meek. Right. So I thought,
that's going back.
Yeah, really, exactly. And then I got this message from him saying, I'll come over to your house. I will pick up the console, and in picking up the console, we can meet, and then I'll take it back to where I live, and I'll fix it up. And so he turned up, and it was, I don't know if you've seen Alan Partridge. There's this great scene where there's this it's one of his fans. I won't go into that, but anyway, he turned up to my house, and I took him into my bedroom, and in my bedroom were about 7 of these mixing desks, which I've been working on, and he kind of took this weird look at me, like, he looking at the exits, thinking, "Is this guy? Am I going to get out alive? I mean, why has this guy got all of my desks? What is this?" And he was, anyway, he ended up staying for dinner, and we subsequently become friends. So we took one of these consoles with us, and a few other instruments, and we packed it right in the car, and then we drove straight down there.
Basically, yeah.
Because it
So it's
doesn't
lovely.
sound like a
And-
sparse record. I mean, it's got fullness, a lushness to it. There's like pedal steel and strings and all that stuff. It doesn't sound like a homemade record exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I can sing this guy's praises because it's not coming from his mouth and he doesn't say it, but I think that also comes down, that really does come down to Franklin's talent with that as well, because he's by complete right a producer as well. You know, like everything we record is mainly the forefront of it is analog, so to speak. So for example, this album, or what got whittled down to this album, because when we went to France, we ended up recording about 60 songs.
Right. Ooh.
So it's a predominantly analog. So Franklin, with his, I kind of call him the sound alchemist in the sense that no, but you laugh.
I wish I wasn't here right
I'm
now.
allowed to, yeah.
Just hide.
I'm allowed to say it, but it's a blend of predominantly analog, but then blending sometimes also, taking the best of the digital and
Sure.
the accessibility of it. But I think Franklin's take from the production level and the equipment he uses and the way he uses it is very unique. It's
Mhm.
very of its own. So when we move around different spaces, and I think it's really interesting on that sound sonically with the way that Franklin works. That's his art,
Right.
The way that the visual side is my art. That's also his
Yeah.
art. But mapping the spaces sonically is a really big thing to us. So using the different mediums and the spaces that we're in, Frankie always pays a lot of attention to that. I mean, take it from there.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest with you, the sound of the record, in terms of what I do, as lovely as Rebecca, as much as I appreciate it, I take a kind of jazz approach to the way in which I produce records. So I kind of envisage a soundscape. So
Right.
you imagine the idea of being the audience member, sitting down in a room or a space and kind of creating it. So as a producer, that's actually, for me, I sometimes feel like I'm kind of copping out a little bit because I'm not creating this beautiful, visceral kind of abstract painting, if you like. I'm literally just recreating a space, and I like that because what you do is you become really resourceful as to how you capture certain sounds within spaces. So like a big part of what I do is taking is thinking about depth, thinking about if you're in a space, for instance, and you listen to early jazz records from the kind of 1940s, 50s, 60s. I mean, some of the best records you'll ever hear from the 1950s.
Sure. Yep.
Because of the sounds of spaces. So a lot of the sound itself is, I have to say, was owed to the space in which it was recorded. With
that in mind, there's a track called "Passing Me By," and it sounds like it has this kind of almost ghostly sounding. I don't know if it's a pedal steel or whatever in it, or you tell me. But it sounds like you kind of captured some kind of vibe in that one. Tell me what's going on there.
That was just again, it was the one and only guitar we could fit in the car, which coupled with a chrome slide, and it was and that song I rooted that song right straight through the desk. So that one the guitar itself was it had a kind of feeling of closeness, and so I was speaking about the interplay between kind of textures and sounds, recording certain things that are really far away, and then recording another source like the guitar going straight into the depth, where you've got this perception of space and of depth. So that guitar, that was a guitar piece, and it's indicative. I think it's indicative of the sound that we were experimenting with at the time. I must say with this album, because we were working with them, what was interesting was this album together. The idea of this album initially was never going to be an album. In fact, it was going to be the idea behind it was going to be a series of EPs, collection of EPs. So
Right.
it was interesting because we kind of had to reconcile that at the end. When we then came to put it together as an album, we had to sit down with our management and say, well, how do we do this? Because the album itself that we put out was at the EPs were meant to be the B-sides, because we thought we were going to put together this whole album. So it was kind of funny how it worked out. But yeah, the by way of the actual sounds and the particularly the slide guitar, that was very eminent at the time, of a kind of a sound that felt very true to us.
I also
Right.
think the other thing as well, in regards to the sound, and I think this plays a huge part of what we do, but also I think the way that the listener receives it, maybe more on a feeling level, but a
Sure.
lot of the music is improvisational led. So it's subconscious governing the song, both on the instrumental and the lyrical side. Pass Me By was one of those songs. So it was an improvisation, so to speak, where
Right.
the tape's reeling and we just go. So that was a song that it wasn't predetermined, there's no lyrics
Gotcha.
written down. It was the same when you went in musically. It's just taking what's in here and just running with it, basically.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
I would start with the guitar and Rebecca would sing, and we'd quite literally, Beck would improvise and I'd just play chords over her improvisation. And then what we'd do is that's why lots of the songs, they kind of, on the tempo level, they waver. So it's what was difficult, because we did everything to tape. You
Right.
then have to kind of go back and record the drums over that tape.
Yeah, that's tough.
So it was, but every song we approached differently. It was
Mhm.
definitely a kind of plethora of ideas. Yeah.
Now you did a video for Passing Me By and also Patience, and you touched on the visual aspect a little bit. What's going on there? How much input do you have as far as what we see in the videos?
Could be the greatest length of affair.
Visually, it's a big part for me, because also the same way that Franklin is, I like to say, sound alchemist. You don't like that. On the song, the visual arts is a huge part of my life as well. So all the imagery, the vinyl design, all of those elements are very much, crafted in that regard from my side. So Passing Me By was being resourceful with what was around us. So Passing Me By was shot where we were in France. Again, that sense of utilizing the landscapes around and the feeling imbued, because that song is very much about the perspective of time. It's very much about the velocity of time, and that feeling of being present within something that's existing and almost nostalgic at the same time, aware of its passing. Which predominantly just being very aware of the ending, and not as how futile it is, but just aware, that you're here, so to speak, and the present comes, but also the aware when you're that present. So around us, it was just that sense of expanse, that sense of drawing close and drawing away in that perspective. Patience was really beautiful, because we were working with a filmmaker who's very talented, who reached out to us because he was really passionate about the music and he wanted to work with us on a visual level. So that was a really beautiful experience. It's very ritualistic. It was done during the summer, the turning of the solstice. We basically went on a trip to a very beautiful mythological part of Wales and shot this piece, and we were all working together, and it led itself very beautifully to our kind of remit of improvisation, because we were all discussing ideas and just again flowing with it, and that was all shot on 16mm film. So
nice.
Visually massively. And I think it's really interesting with us, the way that our minds work together and separately, and the way that intertwines, because also for myself, being a visual artist and a very abstract one, and again analog, because all of my work gets developed in the dark room, the same as Frankie works with predominantly analog material.
With tape. Yep.
So that visual side of my mind, especially when it comes to improvisation, that visual side of my mind is huge, like it's massive. Sometimes I'll just quite literally disappear into landscapes or worlds, and they'll be very, very visual. And then when I come back from after the song, I'm taking.
Well, that's interesting because there are some shots of you singing, and you look like you're just being transported while you're singing, like you're not even there. And I was wondering if that was the case, and if so, where it is that you do go when you're singing like that.
I think, yeah, I do get transported. There is a sense of transcendence because, and again, I like to use the word, but it's very important. But it comes back to the word for me, subconscious, because it's a huge part of my life. It's huge. I mean, I've been keeping like very, very detailed dream diaries for the past, I don't know, 10 years, you know, every day.
Right.
And I think it's a language we obtain within us all. That subconscious part of us is huge. It's so unknown, but it's so vital to learning and emboldening a deeper sense of self, and also a connection with the unknown and what exists externally. And I think when I sing, and the same with live performance, it's the same. It's a complete sense of transcendence, and it's allowing yourself entirely to exist in a remit where you almost disappear into it and where you're following. So as soon as you feel like you're trying to guide it, you've lost it. And I think it's the same when we perform live. And something I feel very, very strongly about is the kind of connection to establish from the music performance. Very deep, well, sense it's very pure. Something I really strongly believe is, how can I expect anyone else to reach it or really feel it on that level and that capacity if I can't myself?
Right.
So the number one thing for me is just completely honestly, just to honestly feel and be able to go there. And if I can access that, other people can access that. And it's the same to be honest, in that sense, we live and breathe it. There's no distinguishment from when it comes to actually creating and producing, and then it's transposed to the live format. There's no difference, you know. It's very genuine in that capacity. So yeah, long answer short, I do disagree.
But you're breaking up a little bit. I want to try and get one more question in. You mentioned live performance, and I see you guys are touring. You're doing shows later in March. So how do these, especially these things with all these layers and stuff, translate to live? Are there loops and tapes, or other people playing with you, or how does it work?
But it's been interesting more recently, because for years, Rebecca and I, because obviously, so on the recording side of things, everything you hear, bar the strings, actually, for the last two songs on this album, you would have heard Begin Again so far. The last song to come out is Leaving. Everything on that record was between me and Rebecca. So obviously, when it comes to creating it live, for the past kind of 5 years or 4 years that we've been playing together, we've had to be pretty resourceful, because obviously it's, you know, we've got songs where there are 24 different instruments playing at the same time. So what we'll do is we've been using lots of loops. So we use lots of loop stations, and we've been kind of creating different textures and trying to kind of get that kind of visceral soundscape things. What really magic more recently in working with musicians. So we only just a couple of months ago in December, we put on this fantastic show in a church called St. Michael's Church in Brighton. And it was we've never experienced anything like it, but we got together. There were about 9 of us on stage. We had a cellist, we had a tenor trumpet, we had a double bass player, viola, violin, piano, guitar, vocals, drums. We had, and so I guess kind of what's been really interesting about the project, and what's I think is actually quite unique about the project, is the fact that we employ totally different instrumentation, totally different approaches to almost every single show we play, based on the environment and the venue itself. So but always with a kind of with a vision of creating that world, if you like, because that's, I mean, in essence, what it is that we try and create is our world, in which the way in which we kind of we explore life, and that we interact with our lives, and the stories and teachings that we learn from it. So it's trying to kind of, I guess, contextualize that through the medium of music and artistry, and bring that to people as a world that they can kind of digest and fall into, and can ride with us. So it's always a journey when it comes to playing live. Definitely.
I'll bet. All right, we're going to have to wrap this up because I think your internet is wearing out. Getting a lot of freeze frames, but we can hear everything, so that's good. But I don't want to push it anymore. But thank you for talking to me about all this. Is fantastic. Hope everything goes well on release day, and hopefully you can come down to this part of the world sometime and play.
Yeah,
I just want to say also, I'm very much admiring your huge collection of vinyl.
Oh yeah, that's just a bit of it.
I bet. Wow. I mean,
it's the LPs. I have like 15,000 7-inches in the other room. So.
Oh my word. Never a dull moment then.
Got carried away. I can.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for speaking with us. And also, we apologize for the slight delay of this.
That's all right. These things happen.
Will slowly fade.
Trying to gather our electricity together.
All righty. Well, stay warm. It looks like you are. And
absolutely. Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll see you sometime.
So
all right.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Bye.